Hi, and welcome to the third episode of Broken Bridge Studios. Today I am going to show you the very first time we turned something. In front of the camera, at least. So we've got here a really nice piece of some hardwood. I'm taking a roughing gouge and a little bit of a sped up version here. You guys are going to have a chance to see this go from a square stock down to a round stock and then eventually to a full candle holder. So here's an example of what that square stock looks like. Pretty straightforward. I've got it mounted on the lathe using the mandrel and the heavy-duty live edge. Can keep this at a fairly medium speed, and here we go. Let's go ahead and see if we can start taking off those corners. Working that roughing gouge back and forth across the small tool rest. A little bit of an angle each time I do it. Really, I'm just working in one direction. And there you go. You start to see those corners being knocked down. Now, as you're going to keep going here, the idea here is that you just keep working and working and working until you stop getting the vibration. And you can kind of see it, even when you're looking at the stock that's turning there on the lathe, you can see a little bit of a jitter in the movement of it. But as more and more that you apply that roughing gouge, it starts to take those corners off and get it to a nice round stock. Still have a little bit of a flat edge on the four sides, so I'm going to do a couple more runs with this roughing gouge. As you can see, it's just really just taking the wood off. Very, very nice. Smooth, even strokes. And again, I'm not seeing that wobble anymore. And that's going to be the goal here. So now that the roughing gouge has pretty much done its job, one or two quick more runs over this and we should have a nice round stock. There we go. So I'm really happy with that. I love the grain. It's a really nice smooth finish, even with that roughing gouge. So I think the next step here is we're going to take an example of, well, there's the original stock. It's what we started with. Now we've got it down to this. So if with that in mind, and the goal here is to make a little candle holder, I'm going to keep going with the roughing gouge, just one or two more turns, just to really smooth this out. And then I'm going to move on to the round edge scraper. Now this, my goal here is I wanted to kind of make a traditional candle holder, a little bit of a spindle, kind of a goblet style. So I'm going to start from roughly around the center and start hollowing out that center to the best that I can. And I'm going to caveat this by saying this is the very first time I've ever done anything like this. I did an initial turn on one piece of wood when I first set the lathe up to make sure everything was working. I'll show you that piece in a little bit. In fact, I've got a photo of it at the very end here. But this is really the very first time I've ever really gone in and tried to shape down a piece of wood into a specific shape. So this is actually kind of a brand new thing for me. Well, there you go. I mean, that's starting to look exactly like what I was hoping for. The idea here is that where the live edge is mounted in, I'm going to be able to put a candle in there. And so here we go. We're going to fire this up. We're going to keep working with that rounded scraper. Now, in fact, you know what? I'm going to move on to the parting tool here. And I'm going to start adding a little bit of some work. I wanted to add in some ribbing to this thing to give it a little bit of a grip and some texture, some visual texture. Yep, now we're going to grab an angled skew, and that's going to be the 3/4 skew, and I'm really going to get in there and start shaping out what I think was that lower foot of the goblet. That skew comes in really handy for rounding over the corners, and then I'll grab the round over and work those corners as well. So there we go. I mean, we're really starting to get that shape in there. I've got some detail coming in. This lathe is really slick. Keeping the speed up, especially now that I've got it down into a shape that I'm really looking for. I really want that wood to come off there as quick as I can. So here I'm going to use that skew again, the angled scraper, and moving back and forth between that and the parting tool and the round nose. Here's a little bit of a different camera angle. That's nice. There you go. You can really start to see, using that round nose scraper, how that wood is just peeling off. Switching over to the skew, I'm working into those details and those ribs right there. Turning the skew onto its large end and then using it again on the flat end to round over those tops. And of course this video is sped up, but you get an idea. When you see that we stop it, you still see have a rough edge. You know, those chisels do a fantastic job. They get it to the rough shape, but there's still a lot of sanding involved. But look at that grain. I mean, it's just absolutely beautiful. This lathe is doing a wonderful job, and I guess so far I'm not really screwing too many things up. Well, I mean, that's the goal here. I'm trying to learn. And I really like the way this is coming out. I like the look. And again, I'm not working off of anything other than just an idea in my head of what I'm kind of going for in a general shape. So we're going to grab some sanding paper here now, fire this thing back up, and here we go with some of this Rockler sanding strips, working that around the piece, move that tool rest out of the way so you guys can see as well, and really start to sand down all those rough edges. And the nice thing about these sanding strips is that you can really get into the detail work. So if you've done those little coves and ribs and everything else, you really can get in there. Now here you'll see that I've not only drilled a hole in the end, but I've also mounted it in the Novichok. And that Novichok is able to hold it in those clamped jaws, and this is going to allow me to work a little bit more now on the top of that candle head, on the top of the candle holder. So I've put in about an inch deep hole, an inch and a half deep hole there that will eventually hold the candles. And my goal here is just to do a really beautiful, just a gently curved divot in the top there. That's, well, hey, that's exactly what I was looking for. And that was just with that angled skew. So that's really bing, bang, boom. That's what I wanted to do. And of course, we still have some sanding work to do. So here we go. We're going to sand down the face. Starting with, I think this is about 150 grit. On these sanding strips, it's going to go up to 650 grit. And then eventually, we can use the sanding micro mesh, and that's going to take it from 800 all the way up. No, sorry, that's actually starting at like about 1200. Maybe I'm wrong. Anyway, something around the range of 800 to 1200, all the way up to 12,000. And so it's really going to put a beautiful finish on this wood. Let's take a look. Nice. So I love that grain. I love the way this thing is coming out. I think that this basswood, and I believe this is either zebrawood or basswood. I want to say it's zebrawood. Is doing a fantastic job. So these are the micro mesh. Again, starting with the coarsest one, which is still up there, either in the 800 to 1,000 grit range. And they just really very quickly, I mean, as soon as you turn on the lathe and you really have it up and moving at a pretty high speed, these are going to tell you when they get finished. And look at that, you can already see that thing starting to buff up and shine up on those edges. That is so pretty. And again, I think this is the best way that I could have done this. I think the Nova was the right way to go as far as mounting this at the end. I like the way that this came out as far as that rounded top and the divot. The sanding, of course, is working beautifully. And I really love the little detail work that I was able to get in onto the sides. There we go. So the micro meshes are done. Beautiful gleaming shine. Knock some of the sawdust out of the hole there. And wow, that's really beautiful. So let's go to apply some crystal coat. This is a finish. Really easy to put on. It's just a wet wipe on, kind of with a paper towel. Let it air dry, and it just beautifully brings out a beautiful, just gleaming shine to hardwood. There we go. We're going to start working this in, and then eventually I'll turn on the lathe, and then really let the lathe and the action of that lathe do the work. So a little bit of a combination of the friction and the heat. I think it activates some molecular level buffers within this thing, especially within this clear coat, and it just beautifully, well, there you go, it shines it up. So let's go ahead and use the Nova tool to release the chuck jaws. Pop this out, and there it is. That's the candle holder I made for one of my boys. Beautiful shine, beautiful grain. I really like the texture on that, and that was fun. So there we go. Those are the two different candle holders that I made. The very first one there on the right, the one we just turned on the left. Well, I hope you guys enjoyed it. Thanks for watching.